All right, so welcome back to the channel. If you didn't see the first video that I put out right before this one, whether it be like a day or a couple days before, I need you to go back and watch that video first because we're dovetailing into this next session in terms of a life insurance sales process. And again, we're implementing NEPQ. So if you ever heard of Jeremy Miner, if you ever heard of Neuro-Emotional Persuasion Questioning, if you ever heard of his company Seventh Level, the company I work with, Better Wealth, we have hired them, and I'm just kind of giving my take on how we would apply what we're learning from them so far to our actual sales process. So the first one that we talked about, the first video that I did before this one, was breaking down two sessions or breaking down two stages. So it was breaking down the connection stage, what that looks like, and the purpose behind it. And then we're also breaking down the very first section of the engagement stage as well, which so happens to be situation questions. Today is going to be dovetailing directly into the very next part of the engagement stage, which specifically is a problem awareness question. So before we go there, I want to address a question from my team in particular, because my name is Demetrius Walker, which I realized I didn't say at the very beginning of this video, but I lead a sales team at a company called Better Wealth. We primarily focus in on high cash value whole life insurance, which is why you're here. You're trying to learn a little bit more about, or a lot more about, how do I position myself and my team, or how do I get to a point where my prospects that I'm speaking with will actually want to take action with me, and take action with me now. And so thanks for being here, because the goal here is to simplify life insurance sales. And I think before we get to the point of simplification, we have to understand what the entire process looks like. We have to put it ingrained into ourselves, and then it becomes a lot more simple as well, because you can't expect to be a master or an expert at anything if you don't put in the work, and more specifically, the required, most necessary work that'll get you where you want to go. So we want to start off with a question that someone from my team actually brought up yesterday. And again, I'm literally in the thick of training my team right now on how to do this for our company specifically. And so one of the members of my team pretty much asked this question right here: if buying decisions are made with emotion, why are we starting with facts based on a non-emotional questions? Let me see if I can actually enlarge this in any way, shape, or form. If I can, great. If I can't, that's all right as well. I just want to see if I can make this bigger. I cannot, and that's all right. If I customize the page, okay. Sorry about that, guys. But yeah, this is the first question that one of the members on my team asked. Sorry about that. He asks, if buying decisions are made with emotion, why are we starting with fact-based, non-emotional questions? Okay. Number one, it boils down to situation questions really do lay the groundwork. They really do lay the groundwork in context for trust. It's a component, like I mentioned in my first video. So I implore you, go back and watch the first video if you haven't already. It boils down to the ABDs of selling. Okay. And what the ABDs of selling do, especially in this particular context, is that it reduces resistance, because we're asking them for information they're already comfortable sharing. We're asking them for information that they were already likely expecting us to ask, because they realize that this is a financial product. And most people, and like 99% of people, will go, okay, these are reasonable questions that we're asking, that the salesperson is asking. It also sets the stage for emotional, I said expiration here. I don't know what that meant there, but it sets the stage for them showing emotional expression, um, by showing that you first understand the facts and the lay of the land from the very beginning. Okay. Now, from a human behavior perspective, people are naturally going to be defensive if we start off with emotion. So if we come in guns a blazing, they're gonna feel like you're doing this as a tactic, and they're like, this is weird. And they're also gonna feel like, you don't even know anything yet. How are you like digging into the emotions where you're just kind of grasping at straws? Like, this doesn't make sense, right? And so, since we know that we have to make sure that we're lowering the guard from the very beginning, one of the ways that we do that is by not trying to implement some tactic that they're going to be thrown for a loop about. Um, Now, once we understand the facts, from there, that's when we can naturally transition into the problem awareness, which is what, again, we're gonna cover in this video today, given the data that they've given us. Now, if you want to break this down, like the entire NEPQ process, if you want to break it down into a frameworked out way of looking at it, from a general phrase to a general phrase, phase to a general phase, it'll be this: you want to start with logic, okay? Then you're going to transition to emotion and expand on that as deeply as you can. And then you're going to rope back in the logic into the emotion, which then drives to or causes them to then get to a point where they're ready to make a commitment. I hope that makes sense. Okay. Now we're 5 minutes into the video and I didn't get to the meat of the discussion yet. Now, problem awareness, ultimately what it does and the purpose of it is it helps the prospect start to recognize problems they didn't really know they had or didn't fully realize they had, right? The emotional door starts to open up, the self-persuasion starts to happen. You're guiding the prospect to a point where they can then connect the dots of like, okay, I've told you this, and now I feel these emotions as well. I'm connecting the dots. I want to move forward and move forward with you and move forward with you now. All in all, we're helping them to see that their problem is, again, way bigger than they thought possible because we've gone deeper into the emotion. And when they feel the deepness of emotion, the gap is widened, the tension inside of them like ramps up, and they're like, I got to do something with this and I want to do this now. So, obviously we're shifting from facts to feelings in the problem awareness. It helps bring the problems that are currently in the subconscious to the conscious level, right? They're actually thinking about it. So for example, so do you like the growth that you're currently getting from where your money's stored now, right? Or if you had a little bit of a softer tone, if you wanted to have that. So do you like the growth you're currently getting from where your money's stored now? Something to that effect, right? When we ask a question like this, we're allowing them to take full ownership over how they feel. This isn't an emotionally driven question. It really just boils down to opinion. So whatever they say to you is what their answer is, and then you have to go off of that. You have to be then nimble, but we also have to be very cognizant of like, are they sharing with me a very surface level answer that could potentially go deeper? And if they are, which gets better with experience, if they are, then you need to decide to go deeper because whatever first answer they give you most of the time is not underneath the surface. It's normally surface level. Okay. Now, notice how in this question, up here, I said, do you like the growth that you're getting? Right? I specifically use the word like and not think in that question because think really triggers the emotional side of the brain, or think really triggers the logical side of the brain. When really, again, people make decisions based on emotion. Engagement stage is mostly about the emotion, especially once we get into problem awareness. So we want to start to delve deeper into the emotion. So by using like swapping a simple word out for the word like instead of think, okay, we then are getting into the emotional side of the brain. We're starting to delve into that, right? And because we're getting into the emotional side of thing, again, that's where the gap really starts to widen. Okay, hope that makes sense. Let's move on to point two here. Along the way, and I've alluded to this already, but I'm going to delve a little deeper. Along the way, you want to make sure that you're probing. You want to make sure that you're clarifying. You're asking those types of questions. Now, there is a difference between clarifying questions and probing questions, and that's what we're going to get into here. Now, clarifying questions, what they do for you is they help you to understand what the prospect means, and you get them to explain their reasons. So they said something, and you go like that, like, well, I guess what are you really getting at when you say that? And I'll give you a few examples in a moment, but you want to use this when they've again said something to you that didn't quite seem complete. It just seemed surface level. It seemed incomplete. So you're asking things like, could I ask you what you meant when you said blank? Or what's driving the need to change the situation now though? Or you can say, what's causing that to happen? Or could you elaborate on that more for me, please? Or I'm not understanding. How does your spouse feel about you fill in the blank? Or you're saying, whoa, hold on. You're on page 15. I'm still way back on page 3. Can you go back when you said, right? We want to just clarify as much as we can because they said something. I was unclear about it. I really want to delve deeper into what the heck were you saying? Because if we don't know what the heck they're talking about and then we want to bring it up later, they're going to be like, that's not what I meant. And then what happens there? You lose trust. And what happens when you lose trust? The guard goes from being down to being back up. And they're like, you're not the professional I want to work with subconsciously. They may not be thinking that directly though. Now, clarifying questions helps to pull out the full meaning of what the prospect has told you. And like I said, you don't want to lose trust if you just go into your all the way into your transition and presentation stage, and you're going off of assumptions, off of you defining things for them, as opposed to them defining it for you. Okay. Now, probing questions is a little bit different. There's some similarities, but this helps the prospect to really start to relive their experiences that they've had with the problem. And it helps to, I like to say, develop out the story a little bit more so, even when it comes to like detail, like painful detail in some instances. So what this does, it creates an even larger gap between where they are and where they want to be. So here's some examples. How long has that been going on for? Has that had an impact on you? In what way? Right? Or in what way though? Okay. Well, why do you feel that not having access to cash when you need it could kind of be an issue? Or why do you feel that taxes or market risk might be a problem for your current retirement plans? Again, notice how I used a emotionally driven word. Not what do you think not having access? No, 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 no. What do you feel not having access to cash? You know what I mean? Why do you feel that taxes or market risk might be a problem? Right? I want to get to the emotional, right? When you start to realize this and you can like test it out with your spouse, you test it out with a good friend of yours, you can test it out with your pastor, you can test it out with your neighbor, right? You ask particular questions and you're gonna it's going to elicit a certain type of response when you ask the right type of question. So, just to summarize, clarifying questions are used to clarify or confirm facts or initial responses. Like, what did you really mean when you said XYZ? Probing questions are designed to dig deeper. You're getting into the emotional reasons, you're getting into the emotional motivations, you're getting into the implications behind what the prospect's really saying. In other words, you're just coming at it from another angle. Hope that makes sense. Now, your tone here is very crucial. So notice how when I went back and I was asking, how long has that been going on for? Or has that had an impact on you? In what way though? Right? Notice how I'm very neutral, very calm, I'm very detached. I'm very like even curious. Like you're never wanting to sound judgmental. You never want to sound pushy and weird because again, if you start to feel like you have to do that at any point in the sale, you lose the sale or it's going to take a lot to win it back. Okay. It should feel like you're trying to understand them rather than trying to sell them a solution. They know that they're there for a solution, but it's your job to help them articulate the problem and provide the solution, but do so in such a way that you're really understanding them first. And you need to be present in that moment at that time. Now, I think most of us know this already, but I want us to consciously, almost like from a third party perspective looking in, having an outer body experience, dare I say, I want you to be way more conscious or conscientious of what you're doing during your calls. How are you coming across during your calls? How are you coming across during your meetings? Because when you have that sort of outer body experience, you can then see yourself and them and how you're interacting with them, and you're going to be able to study human behavior better. And there's no better place to do this as compared to when you listen to your own call recordings, watch your own meetings. How was I doing? Oh shoot, that one thing right there, I'm not going to do that next time. So I would highly, highly, highly encourage that because then, yeah, you know how your prospects thinks, you know how they might think and respond, right? You know how they think, you know how they might think and respond. Then you also know how you can show up in calls, um, and the way that affects the way you're perceived. Okay. Last thing I'll say here is um, you know, since this is the first part of questioning that many of you, most salespeople out there in the world have really never purposefully done, at least not purposefully done regularly. After a key question, I want to make sure that you pause. You got to let it sink in. Let the silence really do the work it's designed to do. Because when you ask a question, if that, especially most of the time, they're not going to ask you like, "Why are you asking that question?" Let it sink in. Remember, this is an angle on sales of digging into the emotion that most salespeople never get to. And so you have to realize that they're not expecting it. And if they're not expecting it, normally a lot of times especially initially, they're not going to know exactly the response to give to you. And so they may think for 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 5 seconds. I know for some of you, 2 seconds feels like an eternity. You can't have any 2 seconds of silence, right? But we have to be able to lean into that. There has to be a regular uh, occurrence that happens within our sales conversations. Absolutely. Um, so in other words, let the neuro-emotional persuasion, again, neuro-emotional persuasion questioning, that's what NEPQ is. Let it do what it's designed to do. Give them space to think and reflect. Um, Now, we may get a lot of this sort of deal here. That's a good question. Or I've never been asked that before. Things like that. That's good. That means you're doing the right thing. Because what that does for you is it raises your status in the client's brain. It further solidifies you as category other. Again, if you haven't watched the video right before this one about the connection stage and situation questions, go back and watch that one. But it further solidifies you as being in category other, and it'll increase the likelihood of them buying from you and buying from you today, not down the line. So again, resist the urge as much as you can to fill the silence with explanation. Just ask the questions, let it be, and let it go from there. So I hope this video was helpful. Let me know what questions you have in the comments. I'm happy to help you out in any ways that I can. And let me know what other pieces, even from this video specifically, that you want me to delve a little bit deeper into, give some real examples of as well. But stay tuned for my next video that I have coming out as well, because we're going to dovetail directly into the solution awareness questions from there. So thanks for watching. Have a good one.